Okay, welcome back, everybody. Josh Weber here, co-founder and CEO of Big Red Jelly. We are diving further into the Big Red Jelly proven process, still sticking with the brand phase, which is the first and, I might argue, the most important phase.
I would also argue that.
There we go. Because I'm joined today with two awesome people, two brand strategists. We have Joshua, our brand director, and we have Anna, our brand strategist and also visual identity lead, which is a great segue into chapter 7 of the brand phase, brand visual identity. So I'm going to put you guys in the hot seat. A little bit, we'll have a conversation, but we're just going to talk about brand visual identity because we've gone through all of these chapters so far together on YouTube. And now we're at brand visual identity, the fun part, right? So let me just kind of kick things off, you guys. In your own words, I guess, I want you to explain what brand visual identity is. Like if you're talking to a client and they say, okay, what is this? Why is it important? This is my logo, right? You know, what do you respond with? How do you describe this chapter? Joshua, you want to start? Or Anna, let's start with you.
Visual identity is the way that your brand strategy looks, but executed visual. Oh, hold it.
Being interviewed.
Visual identity is just the visual execution of your brand strategy. So it all goes back to everything that we talked about in brand foundations and brand DNA, brand core, brand messaging. All of that ties into your visual identity, which is just how that looks in a logo, in colors, and fonts, all tying back to the guiding idea that we start out with.
I like saying the visual identity is, again, going off what Anna said, what people see, what they experience visually, obviously. Typically, people confuse the visual identity with a brand, right? But there's a whole lot that comes before that, as we know, this is chapter 7. So there's a lot that gets put into preparing for your visual identity. And it's a lot more than just a logo, right? That's kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to your brand. You have patterns, graphics. I would even suggest like how you set like sonic branding, video, motion graphics, all those different things, iconography, all those different things, photography, like everything there is part of your visual identity. And so that all needs to be consistent, follow the same strategy, follow the same vibe, speak to the same person, and produce the same purpose.
Yeah, we kind of know, right, that this is important because it's like what they say about cuisine. You eat with your eyes first. Whether we admit it or not, that's probably 99% of the time going to be the first impression that we have of a company is what we see. It's the front of the store before I walk in and even experience the product or service. We're visual creatures, I think, overall, followed by audio, and then there's the experience. So I like that. Let me get into some interesting questions here, you guys. First question is strategy versus art. Okay, so I can have my notes here. Before we open Adobe, let's say, what are the key strategic checkboxes we must tick to ensure the visual identity will be successful? Right, I'm sure you might see that sometimes, like a client's like, I just want it to look good. How do you arrive at a brand from a visual standpoint that's like, hey, this is strategically the right thing to do? What questions do you need to ask? What do you need to understand before? Anna, maybe do you want to kick things off?
Sure, yeah. I always start with, who's seeing this logo, who's the target audience, what do they value, and also what is this industry? Because, if it's...
It's actually a good segue because I was going to talk about audience in a second. I think
Yeah.
we can just go deeper there, Anna. The importance of, you probably see this a lot in your calls. It's like you're talking to the business owner and they're like, this is what I want. This is what I make it bigger, make this, make it pop.
Yeah.
And I think always calling it back to, hold on a second, you're not the consumer here. Your audience is.
Yeah.
What do they want? So how do you learn a little bit more about their audience and how do you connect those dots?
Audience research, audience insight. We always dive into, who's the persona, what do they value, what's going on culturally within this niche. All of that gives great insight.
Love it.
Yeah, along with like kind of industry, right? You have to, if you're like an accountant, you have to be perceived a different way than like a consumer product, right? And so keeping that consistent industry wise, also location makes a huge. Are you going to be mostly digital? Are you going to be print? That influences your visual identity, your logo, your typography, everything. And so those are all elements that we look at. For a logo specifically, and this, spills over into other elements of a visual identity. We keep a couple of fundamental design principles in mind with the logo. We want it to be very simple. So the simpler, the better. A lot of times we have conversations with clients and they're trying to add more things to the logo, more story about the brand. And we have to push back and say, hold your horses. This isn't going to just be floating in the ethos by itself. There's going to be a lot more context. And so we just need a distinct, memorable, simple, scalable emblem that can be a natural reminder of the brand. So people can call back, they can see it a couple times and be like, oh, I recognize that in relation to this brand name. And so that's what we want to do. So, when we have clients say, oh, I want a mountain logo, I'm like, oh, no, let's not do that. There's a lot of things that it breaks my gears in my brain because it's just the most common overdone mark. And so we can have symbols of mountain peaks or things like that, but we typically try to stray away from a lot of those overdone marks just to keep some distinctiveness.
I like it. Here's a question for you guys. I think one of you or someone on the brand team wrote a piece about this, which is interesting. How do you avoid trends too much? That's why she's here.
So it's not about avoiding trends. It's understanding the difference between what's a trend and what's a fad. Trends are insights on where culture is shifting, and fads are things like bubble type that was popular during Barbie, where you want to make sure you're focusing on what your audience is shifting to and what they're favoring. And so you know that so much that you can go there without relying on a fad to get you there, because fads are going to go out of they're going to go out of style, they're going to go out of, next year it's going to be completely different. You don't have to rebrand again next year, but trends will always keep you rooted in your target audience.
I want to comment on that because there's a trend I've been seeing with the advent of AI. In branding, we see, and this kind of goes into the art, like the difference between strategy and art, where you can use art as a strategic differentiator for your brand if you see a lot of other competitors leaning in one way. So one trend that we've been seeing kind of going into out of the information age into the AI age is maximalist brands. I think we spoke on that before, but a lot more color, a lot more wild typography. This has been going even so much as handwritten, doodle logos, something that is you can't repeat it with AI. And so it's kind of a little bit of a cool backlash to these different AI tools where creative strategists are using that to their advantage and being different and doing things by hand, which is a really, really interesting trend moving forward.
I love that. I think, and not to butter my biscuits here, you guys, but I can't do the stuff that you guys do, but I felt like I saw that several years ago, where I think in order to differentiate nowadays, we went through that, we're still in it, but we went through that tech minimalism SaaS branding vibe, right? Sans serif fonts everywhere, very minimalist. And now I think smart brands differentiating is the organic, it's the natural, it's the human. I would even argue imperfections potentially in your visual identity.
Spelling mistakes.
Yeah. It's like art, right? Because it's a little bit of a pride thing when I go up to a painting and I said, Anna, this human being that walks planet Earth, painted this, as opposed to I generated this using an AI. It kind of adds that clout, and this is one of one. You know what I mean? So I think that's really interesting. That's a good segue into my next question here, you guys. In working with business owners, entrepreneurs, founders, your clients, what are some of the most common mistakes you see small businesses to mid-sized businesses making in their visual identity?
I think one big mistake is that they put too much pressure, and the goal for them oftentimes is to have a unique mark, where I don't think that, so that's a safeguard, but it's not the goal. The goal with your logo is to resonate with your audience and to connect with your brand story, be effective in that. But being unique is just making sure that you've checked the box of, okay, we're different from our competitors, we got this going for us. But so much so, sometimes clients focus too much on being unique where they kind of lose the plot a little bit of like, okay, who's your target audience? What is it about your brand that's setting you apart from these competitors? What do we need to say with this logo? Rather than, okay, well, it looks really cool and really different, so boom, done. Oftentimes I feel like that's pretty prominent.
I like that.
I'd say one that I run into a lot, and this is just natural tendency, I think, with every human being, is to separate personal preference from strategic outlook. So that's another place that we battle a lot. Is I know your favorite color is green, but every single one of your competitors is also using green. So we need to be more strategic here and use the opposite of green, red, so that people know immediately, naturally, that you guys are different. You act different. And so that's like a huge thing that we deal with constantly of like, I know you don't really like triangles, but it shows these different aspects of your brand in this way. So that's probably the other big mistake is bringing in too much personal preference over strategic oversight or insight.
Yeah. Do you guys have any examples of this? Can either be real world brands, maybe things you've seen or working with clients where you were able to, based on your research and strategy, create a better logo or visual identity? Do any specific examples come to mind where
Based off of what?
just based off of your research and strategy and understanding the audience, how you changed the visual identity to be better?
Yeah, I think one that comes to my mind right away is a recent project we finished, which was Credence Genomics. So they're in the med tech science or biotech space of DNA sequencing. I had to learn it all myself. And looking at theirs, they really wanted to. Well, they were first trying to penetrate a new market, like a new geographical market, and they also wanted to position themselves as a much more premium, high quality option for pathogen detection. And so the approach there was we need to look much more sophisticated than the next best thing. And so a lot of the thought process there was simplification, using like leveraging different patterns, having high contrast, minimal text, things of that nature, like very high quality imagery. All those different things shifted, not necessarily like it shifted them out of the regulars,
Yeah.
right? And put them to their own place in the market where they could easily go into a situation and just be perceived as the best option.
Love it. Anna, what's your example? Just, something you've done to help a client with their visual identity. It's practical. While you guys are thinking about, I come back to the just being different. If I was a small business owner and I'm looking at my visual identity, I use this example a lot, but Liquid Death, a new water brand, and you can just picture in your mind's eye a quintessential water bottle consumer brand. It's probably clear plastic, blue, green with some sort of swirl logo. And then, insert Liquid Death. And I'm not saying that's always the approach, like be totally contrarian to the market. I think that can be dangerous sometimes because you might alienate the consumer, or they don't know. I remember the first time I bought Liquid Death, I was at a music festival. I thought it was beer. And then I drank it and it was, water. I was like, well, I'm hydrating now. I'm
You
hydrating
get, what's
now.
it called? Like the symptom where you think you're drunk when you just drink water.
Yeah, it's like when you're a kid and your mom's cooking with red wine and you're
Yeah.
anyway, so that is interesting, but that's something to look at, I think, as a small business owner is don't copy the big brands. I think that's dangerous. I think that's very dangerous. You don't have the same budgets. You don't have the same audience. You've got to lean into what makes you special or different, you know?
And what Liquid Death did is they didn't think, okay, what will make us different here? They thought of their brand story, their guiding idea, and not about like what's gonna help, what's gonna make us. They didn't just think what's gonna make us stand out. They also thought, where's this target audience shifting? Who's our target audience? That sort of thing. You can cut that.
Yeah, I mean, case in
I
point,
don't know.
like you see them a lot at concerts, music festivals, etc. It's a slightly different audience.
Yeah.
Last question for you guys. This will be a fun one. What are your pet peeves or red flags when it comes to visual identity? You're like, ooh, that is bad. That is not good. This could also be translated as like, what are some good fundamental things for our listeners to keep in mind? If they're like, okay, well, I've got a visual identity. What should I audit in my visual identity? What should I look at first?
Yeah, I think a really good warning is to not focus on big brands. And if you are going to focus on big brands, focus on when they made their shift when they were small. So if you're thinking of, oh, I want to be like Apple, okay, go back in time
That's what I was thinking,
and focus on how did Apple start, right? Because I watched the Jobs movie recently, and something really interesting came out of that where they were on their way to a conference and they didn't have a brand name. They're just like heading there with their computer, and Steve Jobs is in the car. He's like, "Well," they're like, "Crap, what are we gonna call ourselves?" And they're just kind of spouting names back and forth, and then Steve Jobs, the visionary that he was, said Apple computers, because Apple was the fruit of knowledge, and our product is the fruit of knowledge for our customers. And right there in that moment, you have strategy, you have positioning, you have your people that all focus on a single element, and that's what came out of the brand. And so that's the approach I would recommend. Similar with Nike, right? When they switched from, what was their original name? Blue something
I
shoes.
don't know Nikes, yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, it was like in the mid 70s, they switched to Nike as the brand name, and that was like a complete shift where they made the swoosh logo. They
So
readjusted
yeah,
things.
it can evolve, it should evolve.
Should evolve, but if you're going to compare to when they made that shift and why.
Yeah.
Because Nike did it to be different than the other running shoes. Apple did it to be different from IBM and all those other big tech computer companies. They wanted to be kind of the brand of the people. And so that's where I would spend my time focusing if you are wanting to compare to those brands, because that's where they
What
make.
do you usually see clients getting wrong when you look at their visual identity? For example, some things that I see, I'll just rattle off some of my pet peeves, and pet peeves might be a little harsh, but clip art, and again, like you always have to be understanding. We work with a lot of startup founders, small businesses, and sometimes that's like the first quick thing you do, but eventually you've got to get something that's unique to you, and then brand IP, I think, is actually the next chapter, which we'll talk about the importance of trademarking things, etc. But clip art, in other words, like pieces of your brand that people have seen in a lot of other places, stock photography, don't get me started. That is a pet peeve. Stock photography.
Having too many colors in their color palette. Like I recently had a client who had at least 20 colors in their
Wow.
color palette, and I said, "You've pretty much got the whole wheel in here.
Yeah.
We need to cut this down so that you can have something as an identifier when it comes to your colors."
I like that. I was about to say less is more.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I see that same mistake happening on homepage web design, happening on a flyer. There's something psychologically it makes sense as a business owner. It's like my customer needs to know about all this stuff all at once because I'm passionate about it. It's like, no, you got to whittle this down to 20% of what you think should be there.
I think another one is playing too safe with typography. I mean, everyone's using Helvetica, everyone's using Open Sans, Poppins, that sort of thing. And I think, especially for your main font, your logo font, trying something new and trying to stand out a little bit more
Yeah.
and not just use a font that's on Google Fonts.
That's a
Makes
great
a big difference.
that's a great point. Last thing I'll say, but we don't even think about. We could do part two, visual identity, honestly, and talk about because we talked a lot about logo, but how often do founders think about what's the font that you're using? Because that's everywhere in your brand. We talked about stock photography, death to stock photography, in my opinion. You can talk
Website about that.
Shout out. Textures, iconography. Anna mentioned iconography. Like all these things we don't think about, but they're important, right? Anything else, you guys? Brand visual identity. Any key points? Things we didn't talk about that you would like to?
All over my LinkedIn. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff on visual identity there.
Anna,
Go check out Anna.
Anna has some great thought leadership pieces. Her LinkedIn is awesome. So tune in next time, you guys. I just want to leave you with, visual identity is everything because it's perception, right? And that's what we try to evangelize here at Big Red Jelly. You can have the world's best product market fit, pricing strategy, SEO, et cetera. But if your perception is off, then you're fighting an uphill battle, right? And in order to do that, to Anna's point, you first need to obsess over your customer, your ideal customer, and think about what do they want to feel when they first see your brand. And so those are the dots we're trying to connect, right? It's like, what do we want our ideal customer to feel emotionally when they first see my brand? And so there's a lot of firepower behind what our brand team does. So big shout out to you guys. Thank you. Tune in next time. Best of luck.